Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio, and if you've been following this channel this morning, you know what we're talking about in this particular video. We've talked about Galarian Zapdos V, we've talked about Galarian Moltres V,